The letter arrived at the Copper Creek Ranch on a Tuesday morning in September 1882, carried by a postman who looked like he had ridden through hell itself to deliver it. Tucker Warren held the dusty envelope in his calloused hands, his eyes narrowing at the desperate scrawl of his name across the front. And when he tore it open and read the words inside, his blood ran cold with a fear he had not felt since the war ended 17 years ago. Tucker stood 6 feet tall with shoulders broadened by years of breaking horses and mending fences, his dark hair perpetually shadowed by the worn Stetson he had owned since he was barely 20. At 33, he had built a respectable life for himself in the high desert country of eastern California, running cattle across land that stretched between the Sierra Nevada and the white expanse of Owens Lake. He had never married, never found a woman who could tolerate the isolation of ranch life or the long silences that came with a man who had seen too much death during the war. But he had never forgotten Olivia Monroe, the girl with copper-colored hair who had written him letters during those bloody years, whose words had kept him sane when the world had gone mad around him. The letter shook in his hands as he read it again, standing in the dusty yard while his horses watched him with dark, patient eyes. Her handwriting was rushed, the ink smeared in places as though she had been crying while she wrote. "Tucker, I know I have no right to ask anything of you after all these years. I know you built a new life and probably forgot about the girl who used to send you letters from Philadelphia. But I am in terrible trouble and you are the only person I trust enough to help me. My husband died 6 months ago. He left me with debts I did not know existed. A man named Carlton Hayes has bought up those debts, and he says I must marry him or he will take everything, including my son. I fled Philadelphia with James 3 weeks ago. We made it as far as Keeler, California, but Hayes has men looking for us. I am hiding in a boarding house run by a woman named Mrs. Chen, but I do not know how much longer we can stay hidden. Please, if you ever cared for me at all, come help us. I am so afraid. Olivia." Tucker read the letter 3 times before he folded it carefully and placed it in his shirt pocket, right over his heart. His jaw clenched tight enough to make his teeth ache. Keeler was 3 days' hard ride south along the eastern side of the Sierras, a mining town that had sprung up to serve the silver operations in the Inyo Mountains. He knew the country well enough, had driven cattle through there twice in the past 5 years. It was rough territory, full of men who asked no questions and gave no quarter. He turned on his heel and strode toward the barn, his mind already calculating what he would need for the journey. His ranch foreman, a grizzled former cavalry scout named Pete Rodriguez, looked up from the tack he was mending when Tucker burst through the barn doors. "Pete, I need you to run the ranch for at least a week, maybe longer," Tucker said, already pulling his best saddle from its rack. "I have to ride south and I have to leave within the hour." Pete set down the bridle he had been working on and stood, reading the tension in Tucker's posture with the ease of a man who had served with him in the war. "What happened?" "Someone I knew a long time ago needs help. Bad help." Tucker grabbed his bedroll and began strapping it behind his saddle. "There is a man threatening her and her son. I need to bring them back here where they will be safe." Pete did not ask any more questions. He simply nodded and moved to help Tucker prepare. "Take Ranger," he said, gesturing to the big bay gelding in the corner stall. "He has got the endurance you will need and he does not spook easy. I will pack you enough provisions for 5 days and make sure your Winchester is clean." Tucker worked with efficient, practiced movements, his thoughts racing ahead to Keeler and what he might find there. He had not seen Olivia Monroe in 15 years, not since he had returned from the war to find that she had married a banker from Philadelphia and moved east. The news had hollowed him out for months, but he had eventually accepted it as the way things had to be. A girl like Olivia, educated and refined, deserved more than a ranch hand with nightmares and uncertain prospects. He had let her go because he loved her enough to want her to have a better life. But now she was in danger, and every protective instinct he possessed roared to life like a fire catching dry timber. Within an hour, Tucker was mounted on Ranger with his supplies packed efficiently behind the saddle. His Winchester rifle rested in its scabbard, and his Colt revolver sat heavy on his hip. Pete handed him a leather pouch filled with jerky, hardtack, and coffee. "Ride careful," Pete said, squinting up at him in the bright morning sun, "and bring them back safe." Tucker nodded once, touched the brim of his hat, and urged Ranger into a trot that quickly became a ground-eating lope. The ranch disappeared behind him as he headed south, following the wagon roads and game trails that would take him through the high desert country toward Keeler. The September heat was already building, but the altitude kept it from being unbearable. He would make good time if the weather held and Ranger stayed sound. As he rode, Tucker let his mind drift back to those war years, when Olivia's letters had been the only beautiful thing in a world of mud and blood and screaming. She had been 16 when she started writing to him, the daughter of a family friend who had wanted to support the soldiers fighting for the Union. Her letters had been innocent at first, full of news about Philadelphia society and questions about what life was like in the Army. But over the months and years, they had deepened into something more. She had told him about her dreams of seeing the West, of wide open spaces and endless sky. He had told her about the ranch he planned to build when the war ended, about the horses he would raise and the life he would carve out of the wilderness. They had never spoken of love directly, but it had been there in every line, every carefully chosen word. When he finally returned home in 1865, battered and older than his 20 years, he had gone to Philadelphia to see her. She had been 21 then, beautiful in a way that made his chest ache. They had spent one perfect afternoon walking through Fairmount Park, talking about everything and nothing, and he had been working up the courage to ask her to come west with him when she had told him about Robert Monroe, the banker who had been courting her for months. "My father approves of him," she had said, her green eyes not quite meeting Tucker's. "He can provide stability, Tucker, a real home. I cannot ask you to give up your dreams for me, and I cannot live the kind of life you want. It would not be fair to either of us." He had left Philadelphia the next morning, his heart feeling like a stone in his chest, and he had never contacted her again. If she wanted stability and society, he would not stand in her way. But now she needed him, and he would ride through hellfire itself to reach her. The first day of riding took him through the familiar territory around his ranch, then down into the long valley that ran between the Sierra Nevada and the White Mountains. The landscape was painted in shades of brown and gold, dotted with sagebrush and the occasional twisted juniper. Hawks circled overhead, riding the thermals, and jackrabbits burst from cover as Ranger's hoofbeats disturbed the silence. Tucker pushed hard but not recklessly, knowing that wearing out his horse would help no one. He stopped twice to water Ranger at creeks and let the gelding crop at the tough grass that grew near the water. As the sun began to sink toward the jagged line of the Sierras, painting the mountains in shades of purple and gold, Tucker made camp in a small canyon that offered protection from the wind. He unsaddled Ranger, rubbed the horse down, and hobbled him where he could graze on the sparse vegetation. Then Tucker built a small fire and made coffee, chewing on jerky while he watched the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. He pulled Olivia's letter from his pocket and read it again by firelight. A son. She had a son. The boy would be young, probably no more than 5 or 6 years old. Tucker tried to imagine Olivia as a mother and found that the image came easily. She had always been gentle, quick to laugh and quicker to offer kindness. What kind of man had her husband been to leave her drowning in debt? And what kind of devil was this Carlton Hayes, who would threaten a widow and her child? Tucker's jaw tightened as he stared into the flames. He did not consider himself a violent man, not anymore. The war had burned most of the rage out of him, leaving behind a weariness and a desire for peace. But he would do whatever it took to protect Olivia and her son. Whatever it took. He slept in brief, restless intervals, always aware of the sounds of the desert night around him. By the time the eastern sky began to lighten, he was already saddling Ranger and preparing for another long day of riding. The second day took him deeper into the Owens Valley, past scattered ranches and small settlements that clung to life in this harsh country. The land here was drier, more unforgiving, and the sun beat down with relentless intensity. Tucker stopped at a small ranch around midday to refill his canteens and buy some grain for Ranger. The rancher, a weathered man with suspicious eyes, asked no questions when Tucker offered him a silver dollar for the supplies. "Heading to Keeler?" the rancher asked, nodding south. "That is right," Tucker replied. "Rough town," the rancher said. "Silver brought in all kinds, you watch yourself." Tucker touched his hat in acknowledgement and rode on. As the day wore on, the landscape became more desolate. The Owens Lake appeared in the distance, its waters glinting white with alkali deposits that made it largely useless for anything except the chemical works that had been established on its shores. The smell of the place carried on the wind, sharp and mineral. He pushed through the afternoon heat, giving Ranger frequent rests in what little shade could be found. His thoughts circled constantly back to Olivia, wondering what she must be going through, how frightened she must be. The fact that she had reached out to him after all these years told him just how desperate her situation had become. He tried not to think about how she might have changed, whether 15 years and a marriage had transformed her into someone he would not recognize. That night he camped in the lee of a rocky outcrop, exhausted but unable to quiet his mind enough for real sleep. He kept seeing Olivia as she had been that day in Philadelphia, her hair catching the sunlight, her smile tentative and sad as she told him about the banker she was going to marry. He should have fought for her then. He should have told her that he loved her, that he would do whatever it took to make her happy. But he had been young and proud and convinced that he had nothing to offer a woman like her. He would not make that mistake again. The third day began before dawn, with Tucker riding south under a sky that slowly transformed from black to deep blue to the pale gold of morning. Ranger was tired but still willing, and Tucker rationed the remaining grain to keep the horses' strength up. The town of Keeler appeared on the horizon around mid-morning, a ramshackle collection of buildings clustered near the shore of Owens Lake. Smoke rose from chimneys, and the sound of hammers ringing on metal carried across the desert air. Tucker's heart began to pound as he rode into town. Keeler was exactly what he had expected, a mining town full of rough men and rougher opportunities. The main street was lined with saloons, supply stores, and a few boarding houses. Men loitered on the wooden sidewalks, watching Tucker with the casual assessment of those who spent their lives measuring potential threats. He kept his expression neutral, his hand nowhere near his gun, as he guided Ranger toward what looked like a livery stable. The stable owner was a bent old man with rheumy eyes who took Ranger's reins and promised to give the horse a good rub-down and extra grain. Tucker paid him generously and asked, "You know where I can find a boarding house run by a woman named Mrs. Chen?" The old man's expression grew cautious. "What business you got with Mrs. Chen?" "Personal business," Tucker replied evenly. I am not looking for trouble, just need to see someone who is staying there. The stable owner studied him for a long moment, then jerked his head to the east. 2 streets over, blue door, but you mind yourself. Mrs. Chen does not tolerate any nonsense in her place. Tucker thanked him and headed in the direction indicated, his boots loud on the wooden sidewalk. He was acutely aware of the curious stares that followed him, the way conversation stopped as he passed. Small towns always notice strangers, and a mining town like Keeler would be especially wary. He kept his pace steady and his gaze forward, projecting the calm confidence of a man who belonged exactly where he was. The boarding house with the blue door stood at the end of a side street, a 2-story building that looked slightly more respectable than many of its neighbors. The paint was faded but not peeling, and the windows were clean. Tucker climbed the steps to the porch and knocked firmly on the door. A woman answered after a moment, small and straight-backed with iron-gray hair pulled into a severe bun. Her dark eyes swept over Tucker with a penetrating intelligence that missed nothing. "Yes, Mrs. Chen." Tucker removed his hat respectfully. "My name is Tucker Warren. I am looking for Olivia Monroe. She sent me a letter asking for help." Mrs. Chen's expression did not change, but something shifted in her posture. She glanced past Tucker, scanning the street, then stepped back. "Come in, quickly." Tucker entered the dim hallway and Mrs. Chen shut the door firmly behind him. She turned to face him, her arms crossed over her chest. "Mrs. Monroe said someone might come, but she did not know if you would actually receive her letter in time. Do you have that letter with you?" Tucker pulled the worn envelope from his pocket and handed it to her. Mrs. Chen examined it carefully, comparing the handwriting to something she apparently already knew, then nodded. "Follow me. She is upstairs. But I warn you, Mr. Warren, if you bring trouble to my house, I will not hesitate to use the shotgun I keep behind the desk." "I understand, madam," Tucker replied. "I am here to help, not cause problems." Mrs. Chen led him up a narrow staircase to the 2nd floor, stopping at the 3rd door on the right. She knocked softly. "Mrs. Monroe, you have a visitor, the one you were hoping for." There was a moment of silence, then the sound of a lock being turned. The door opened slowly, and Tucker found himself looking into a face he had not seen in 15 years. Olivia Monroe had changed, but not in the ways that mattered. Her copper hair was still thick and beautiful, though she wore it pinned up now in a style that spoke of maturity and motherhood. Her face had lost some of the softness of youth, her features now more defined, with faint lines around her green eyes that suggested both laughter and sorrow. She was thinner than he remembered, her dress hanging a bit loose on her frame, and there were shadows under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and constant worry. But when she saw him, her entire face transformed. Her eyes went wide, then filled with tears, and she pressed one hand to her mouth as though to hold back a sob. "Tucker," she whispered, "you came, you actually came." "Of course I came," Tucker said, his voice rougher than he intended. "Did you think I would not?" She made a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and then she was moving toward him, closing the distance between them. Tucker caught her as she threw her arms around his neck, holding her tight while she cried against his shoulder. He could feel her trembling, could feel how thin she had become, and a fierce protectiveness surged through him. "You are safe now," he murmured into her hair. "I am here. I will not let anyone hurt you." She clung to him for a long moment before finally pulling back, wiping at her eyes with shaking hands. "I am sorry. I did not mean to fall apart like that. I have just been so frightened, and I did not know if you would get the letter in time, or if you would even want to help after all these years." "I will always help you, Olivia," Tucker said firmly. "Always. Now tell me what is happening. Who is this man Hayes and what does he want?" before Olivia could answer, a small voice came from inside the room. "Mama, who is that man?" Tucker looked past Olivia and saw a boy standing near the bed, perhaps 5 years old, with dark hair and serious eyes that watched Tucker with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. The child was thin like his mother, dressed in clothes that had been mended multiple times. Olivia turned and held out her hand to the boy. "Come here, James. This is Mr. Warren. He is an old friend and he is going to help us." James came forward slowly, staying close to his mother's side. He looked up at Tucker with those solemn eyes. "Are you a cowboy?" Tucker crouched down to be at the boy's eye level, his expression gentle. "I suppose I am. I raise horses and cattle on a ranch north of here. Your mother and I knew each other a long time ago, before you were born. She wrote me a letter saying she needed help, so I rode here as fast as I could." "For 3 days?" James asked. "That is right, 3 days." The boy considered this, then nodded as though Tucker had passed some internal test. "Mama says we might have to hide forever. I do not like hiding. I want to go outside and play." Tucker felt something tighten in his chest. He looked up at Olivia, who had fresh tears streaming down her face. "No more hiding," Tucker said firmly. "Not if I have anything to say about it." Mrs. Chen, who had been standing in the doorway watching this exchange, spoke up. "Mrs. Monroe, I will bring up some tea and something to eat." "Mr. Warren, you look like you could use a meal after 3 days on the trail." "That would be much appreciated, madam," Tucker said, straightening. Mrs. Chen nodded and disappeared down the hallway. Olivia gestured for Tucker to come fully into the room, and he entered, removing his hat and holding it in his hands. The room was small but clean, with one narrow bed, a washstand, and a single chair by the window. A few clothes hung on pegs on the wall, and a worn carpetbag sat in the corner. It was clear that Olivia had left Philadelphia with almost nothing. "Sit, please," Olivia said, gesturing to the chair. She sat on the edge of the bed with James pressed against her side. "I hardly know where to start." "Start at the beginning," Tucker said gently, settling into the chair. "Take your time. I need to know everything if I am going to help you properly." Olivia took a deep breath, her hand absently stroking James's dark hair. "Robert, my husband, was a banker in Philadelphia, or at least, that is what everyone thought. It turned out he was involved in some very risky investments, schemes that I did not know anything about. When he died last winter, suddenly, of a heart condition, I discovered that we were deeply in debt. The house was mortgaged beyond its value. There were loans from private lenders that I had never heard of. I was left with almost nothing except James and a mountain of papers demanding payment." She paused, swallowing hard. "Carlton Hayes was one of Robert's business associates. He came to see me a week after the funeral and told me he had bought up all of Robert's debts. He said he would forgive everything, let me keep the house, if I agreed to marry him." Tucker's jaw clenched. "And when you refused," he became angry. "He said I was being foolish, that a woman alone with a child had no prospects. When I still refused, he started making threats. He said he would have me arrested for fraud, that he would claim Robert had stolen from him, and that I must have been involved. He said he would make sure James was taken away from me and placed in an orphanage." Olivia's voice broke. "I could not let that happen, so I took what little money I had left, bought train tickets, and ran. I thought if I could get far enough away, maybe he would forget about us. But he has men looking for us. I have seen them in town, asking questions." "What do these men look like?" Tucker asked, his mind already working through possibilities and dangers. "2 of them," Olivia said. "One is tall and thin with a beard, always wearing a black coat. The other is shorter, heavy-set, with a scar across his forehead. They have been in Keeler for 3 days now, going to all the boarding houses and asking about a woman traveling with a young boy. Tucker nodded slowly. All right, here is what we are going to do. We are going to leave Keeler tomorrow morning early before most of the town is awake. I will take you both back to my ranch. Once you are there, you will be safe. I have good men working for me, and the ranch is remote enough that no one will find you unless I want them to. But what about Hayes? Olivia asked, her voice trembling. He will not give up. He is obsessed with controlling me, with proving that he can have whatever he wants. Even if we go to your ranch, he will eventually find us. Then I will deal with him when he does, Tucker said quietly. But first, we get you out of Keeler. One problem at a time. Mrs. Chen returned with a tray bearing tea, bread, and cold chicken. Tucker realized he was famished and ate gratefully, while Olivia explained more details about her flight from Philadelphia and the 3 weeks she had spent traveling west, always looking over her shoulder, always afraid. James sat quietly, leaning against his mother, occasionally reaching out to take a piece of bread from the plate. As the afternoon wore on, Tucker began to make plans. He would need to get supplies for the return journey, enough for 3 people including a young child. He would need to scout the town to see if he could identify Hayes's men, and he would need to make sure they could leave without being followed. I need to go out for a while, Tucker said as the sun began to sink toward the Sierras. I want to get a sense of this town and see if I can spot the men you described. You stay here, keep the door locked, and do not open it for anyone except Mrs. Chen or me. Understood? Olivia nodded, fear flickering in her eyes. Be careful, Tucker. Hayes's men are dangerous. I heard them talking outside the boarding house last night. They carry guns and they do not seem to care who gets hurt. I will be careful, Tucker promised. He looked at James. You take care of your mother while I am gone, all right, the boy straightened, nodding seriously. I will. Tucker left the boarding house and spent the next 2 hours walking through Keeler, observing and listening. He stopped at a mercantile to buy additional supplies, using the opportunity to chat with the store owner about the town and any strangers who might have come through recently. He learned that Hayes's men had indeed been asking questions, and that most people in town were wary of them. Outsiders coming in and throwing their weight around never sat well with frontier communities. He spotted one of the men Olivia had described standing outside a saloon, the tall, thin one with the black coat. The man had the look of someone who spent his time on the edges of the law, his eyes constantly scanning the street, one hand never far from the gun on his hip. Tucker made a mental note of the man's position and continued his circuit of the town, eventually returning to the livery to check on Ranger. The old stable owner was currying the bay gelding when Tucker arrived. Your horse is a good one, the old man said. Got staying power. You planning on leaving soon? Tomorrow morning, Tucker replied. Early. I will need him ready at first light. The old man nodded. I will have him saddled and waiting. You might want to know those 2 men who have been asking questions around town. They are staying at the Silver Dollar Hotel. Been drinking in the saloon most nights, getting loud about finding some woman who owes their boss money. Is that so? Tucker said carefully. Just thought you might want to know. The old man went back to brushing Ranger, but his expression suggested he understood more than he was saying. Tucker thanked him and made his way back to Mrs. Chen's boarding house as darkness settled over Keeler. The streets were coming alive with the noise of men finishing their work shifts and heading to the saloons. Laughter and piano music drifted through the air, along with the smell of cooking food and tobacco smoke. Mrs. Chen let him in without a word and gestured toward the stairs. Tucker climbed to the 2nd floor and knocked softly on Olivia's door. It is Tucker. She opened the door immediately, relief flooding her face when she saw him. "I was worried." "I am all right," he assured her, entering the room. James was curled up on the bed, already asleep, his small face peaceful in the lamplight. Tucker kept his voice low. "I spotted one of Hayes's men. They are staying at the Silver Dollar Hotel. I want to leave at dawn before they are awake and moving around. Can you be ready?" "We have been ready since we arrived," Olivia said softly. "Everything we own is in that carpet bag. It will take us 5 minutes to pack." Tucker nodded. "Good. I am going to sleep in the stable tonight. Keep an eye on things. If anything happens, if those men come here, you send Mrs. Chen to get me immediately." "Tucker." Olivia reached out and caught his hand, her fingers warm against his. "Thank you. I know I have no right to ask this of you, but I am so grateful you came. I did not know where else to turn." He looked down at her hand in his, then up at her face, at those green eyes that had haunted his dreams for 15 years. "You have every right to ask, Olivia. I should have been there for you a long time ago. I should have fought for you in Philadelphia. I did not, and I have regretted it every day since. But I am here now, and I promise you I will not let anyone hurt you or James, not while I am breathing." Her eyes filled with tears again. "I made the wrong choice back then. I thought I needed stability and society approval, but all I got was a loveless marriage and debts I did not even know existed. I have thought about you so many times over the years, wondered what my life might have been like if I had been brave enough to choose differently." Tucker lifted his free hand and gently brushed a tear from her cheek. "The past is done. All we can do is move forward. But Olivia, when this is over, when you and James are safe, we need to talk about what comes next. Because I have not stopped caring about you, not in all these years, and I need to know if there is any chance that you might feel the same." "I do," she whispered. "I never stopped caring about you either, Tucker. Not even when I was married to Robert. I tried to be a good wife, but my heart was never fully his. It was always partly yours, whether I admitted it or not." Tucker felt something shift in his chest, like a door opening after years of being locked. He wanted to kiss her, wanted to pull her close and promise her everything would be all right, but this was not the time. They were still in danger, still vulnerable. First he had to get her to safety. Then they could explore what lay between them. "Get some rest," he said softly. "Tomorrow will be a long day." She nodded and reluctantly released his hand. Tucker left the room and made his way back to the livery stable, where he bedded down in an empty stall near Ranger. Sleep came in fitful intervals, his hand never far from his gun, his mind constantly alert for any sound that might signal danger. Dawn came cold and clear, the sky lightening from black to gray to pale gold. Tucker was already awake, saddling Ranger and preparing for the journey. The old stable owner appeared with coffee and nodded approvingly at Tucker's preparations. "You are smart to leave early," the old man said. "Those men from the hotel will not be stirring for at least another hour. They drank heavy last night." Tucker thanked him and led Ranger through the quiet streets to Mrs. Chen's boarding house. The town was mostly still asleep, only a few early risers moving about their business. Mrs. Chen answered his soft knock immediately, as though she had been waiting. "They are ready," she said simply. Olivia appeared at the top of the stairs with James, both of them dressed in traveling clothes. The boy was still half asleep, rubbing his eyes as his mother guided him down the steps. Olivia carried the carpet bag, and a small bundle that Tucker guessed contained food for the journey. "Thank you for everything, Mrs. Chen," Olivia said, her voice thick with emotion. "You took us in when no one else would. I will never forget your kindness." Mrs. Chen's stern expression softened slightly. "You take care of yourself and that boy, Mrs. Monroe. And you," she turned to Tucker, "you keep them safe." "I will," Tucker promised. He settled Olivia on Ranger's back, then lifted James up to sit in front of her. The boy was light as a feather, all knobby limbs and big eyes. Tucker tied their bags securely behind the saddle, then took Ranger's reins and began leading them through the awakening town. He walked rather than rode, wanting to appear as unthreatening as possible, just a man helping a woman and her child travel to wherever they were going. They had made it to the edge of town when Tucker heard the shout behind them. "Hey, that is them. That is the woman." Tucker's blood turned to ice. He spun around and saw the two men Olivia had described running toward them from the direction of the Silver Dollar Hotel. The tall one in the black coat was waving his arms, and the shorter one with the scar was already reaching for his gun. "Hold on tight," Tucker said to Olivia, his voice deadly calm. He swung up behind her and James, gathered the reins and urged Ranger into a gallop. The big gelding responded instantly, his powerful legs eating up the ground as they raced north out of Keeler. Gunshots cracked behind them, the sound sharp in the morning air. Tucker leaned low over Olivia and James, shielding them with his body as he pushed Ranger harder. The horses' hooves thundered against the hard-packed earth, kicking up clouds of dust. More shots rang out, but the distance was already too great. Hayes's men were on foot and Ranger was strong and fresh after a night's rest. They rode hard for a mile before Tucker allowed Ranger to slow to a trot, then a walk. He turned in the saddle, scanning the landscape behind them. There was no sign of pursuit. Hayes's men would need to get horses, and by then, Tucker would have too much of a lead for them to catch up. "Are you both all right?" Tucker asked, his heart still hammering in his chest. "We are fine," Olivia said, though her voice was shaking. "James, are you all right?" "That was scary," the boy said, his arms wrapped tight around the saddle horn. "But Mr. Warren kept us safe, just like he said he would." Tucker felt the tension in his shoulders ease slightly. "We are not out of danger yet. Those men will follow us, and they will probably wire Hayes to send more men. We need to move fast and stay alert. But we have a good head start, and I know this country better than they do. We will make it to the ranch." The return journey was nothing like the ride south had been. Tucker pushed them hard, stopping only when absolutely necessary to rest Ranger and let Olivia and James eat and drink. He kept them off the main roads, using game trails and less traveled paths that wound through the high desert country. It was slower going but safer, less chance of running into anyone who might report their direction of travel back to Hayes's men. James proved to be a brave little soul, never complaining even when Tucker knew the boy must be exhausted and sore from the constant riding. Olivia held her son close, her arms wrapped protectively around him, and Tucker marveled at her strength. She had been through so much, had fled across the country with nothing but her child and a desperate hope, and she had not broken. She had found the courage to reach out for help, and now she was enduring this grueling journey with quiet determination. They made camp the first night in a sheltered canyon, and Tucker built only the smallest fire, just enough to boil water for coffee and warm some beans. Olivia spread out blankets for James, who fell asleep almost immediately, and then she sat beside Tucker near the fire. "Do you think they will keep following us?" she asked quietly, her eyes on the flames. "Hayes sounds like a man who does not like being told no," Tucker replied. "So yes, I think he will keep trying. But once we reach my ranch, we will be in a better position to defend ourselves if necessary. And I have some friends, men I trust, who can help us figure out a more permanent solution." "I hate that I have brought this danger to you," Olivia said, her voice breaking. "You built a good life for yourself, and now I have dragged you into my mess." Tucker reached out and took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "You did not drag me anywhere. I came because I wanted to, because I care about you. I have always cared about you, Olivia. And now that I have you back in my life, I am not letting you go again. Not unless you tell me that is what you want." She turned to look at him, her green eyes reflecting the firelight. "That is not what I want. I want to stay with you, Tucker. I want James to grow up knowing what it means to have a good man in his life, someone who keeps his promises and protects the people he loves. I want us to have a chance to see if what we felt 15 years ago is still real." "It is real," Tucker said softly. "At least, it is for me. You are not a memory or a dream, Olivia. You are a real woman sitting here beside me, and I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you. I have loved you since I was 19 years old and reading your letters by campfire light. And I will spend the rest of my life proving it to you if you will let me." Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she was smiling. "I love you too. I think I always have, even when I was trying to convince myself otherwise. When Robert died, one of the first thoughts I had after the grief and shock was that maybe now I could find you. Maybe now I could have the life I should have chosen the first time. Is that terrible?" "No," Tucker said, pulling her close. "It is honest. And we have both wasted enough time being anything other than honest." He kissed her then, a gentle press of lips that tasted of coffee and hope and 15 years of longing. Olivia sighed against his mouth and kissed him back, her hands coming up to rest against his chest. They stayed that way for a long moment, holding each other under the stars, letting themselves believe that maybe, despite everything, they could have a future together. They continued their journey at first light, and Tucker began to relax slightly as familiar landmarks appeared. They were getting close to his territory now, close to the land he knew like the back of his hand. Hayes's men would have a much harder time tracking them here, if they had even managed to follow this far. On the afternoon of the second day after leaving Keeler, they crested a ridge and Tucker pointed to the valley below, where buildings and corrals were visible in the distance. "That is Copper Creek Ranch. That is home." Olivia drew in a sharp breath. "It is beautiful, Tucker. It is exactly how you described it in your letters." James, who had been dozing against his mother, perked up. "Is that where we are going to live? Are there really horses?" "There are plenty of horses," Tucker assured him, "and cattle too. You will have room to run and play and no more hiding." As they rode down into the valley, Tucker saw Pete Rodriguez emerge from the barn, shading his eyes against the afternoon sun. The foreman's weathered face broke into a smile when he recognized Tucker, and he strode forward to meet them. "Boss, you are back," Pete said. Then his eyes moved to Olivia and James. "And you brought company." Tucker dismounted and helped Olivia and James down. "Pete, this is Olivia Monroe and her son James. They are going to be staying with us for a while." "Olivia, this is Pete Rodriguez, my ranch foreman and the best friend a man could ask for." Pete touched the brim of his hat respectfully. "Madam, young man, welcome to Copper Creek. Any friend of Tucker's is welcome here." "Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez," Olivia said, her voice weary but genuine. "We are very grateful for your hospitality." "Just Pete, madam," he said with a slight smile. Then his expression grew serious as he looked at Tucker. "We have some things to discuss, but it can wait until you have got your guests settled. The house is clean and there is food in the kitchen. I will take care of your horse." Tucker nodded his thanks and led Olivia and James toward the ranch house. It was a solid structure built of timber and stone, with a wide porch that looked out over the valley. Tucker had built it with his own hands over the course of 2 years, and it had always felt empty despite being exactly what he wanted. Now, watching Olivia climb the porch steps with James's hand clutched in hers, it suddenly felt like it might become a real home. Inside, the house was simple but comfortable. There was a main room with a stone fireplace, a kitchen area, and 2 bedrooms in the back. Tucker showed Olivia to the larger bedroom which had been his. "You and James can stay here," he said. "I will bunk in the other room." "Tucker, we cannot take your room," Olivia protested. "You can and you will," he said firmly. "I want you to be comfortable. There are clean linens in the chest, and I will have Pete bring up water so you can wash. Rest for a while. I need to talk to Pete and make sure everything is secure here." Olivia looked like she wanted to argue further, but exhaustion won out. She nodded and sank down onto the edge of the bed, pulling James against her side. "Thank you, Tucker, for everything." He left them to rest and found Pete waiting on the porch. The 2 men walked away from the house, toward the corrals where they could talk privately. "What kind of trouble are you in, boss?" Pete asked without preamble. Tucker filled him in on everything. Olivia's letter, the situation with Carlton Hayes and his men, the chase out of Keeler. Pete listened without interrupting, his expression growing grimmer as the story unfolded. "So you are expecting this Hayes fellow to come looking for her," Pete said when Tucker finished. "I am," Tucker confirmed. "And when he does, we need to be ready. I need you to spread the word to the other hands. Anyone who does not want to be involved in this, I will give them 2 months' wages and they can ride out, no hard feelings. But anyone who stays needs to understand that we might have a fight on our hands." Pete snorted. "None of the boys will leave. They are all loyal to you, and most of them would not take kindly to some rich Easterner coming out here and trying to push around a woman and her kid. We will stand with you." Relief washed through Tucker. "Thank you, Pete, I mean that." "No thanks necessary," Pete said gruffly. "Now, what is your plan? We cannot just sit here waiting for trouble to come to us." "I know," Tucker agreed. "First, I need to make sure Olivia and James are settled and feel safe. Then I am going to send some telegrams. See if I can find out more about Carlton Hayes and what kind of legal standing he actually has. If his claim on those debts is not legitimate, or if he has been engaging in fraud, maybe we can have him arrested before he even makes it out here." "That is smart," Pete said. "The sheriff in Independence might be able to help. He is a fair man and he does not like people who abuse the law." Tucker nodded. "I will ride into Independence tomorrow and talk to him. In the meantime, I want guards posted at night and someone always keeping an eye on the road that leads here. If Hayes or his men show up, I want advance warning." They talked through the details for another hour, making plans and contingencies. By the time Tucker returned to the house, evening was falling and the ranch was settling into its nightly routines. He found Olivia in the kitchen, cooking something that smelled amazing over the stove. "You should be resting," Tucker protested. "I have rested," Olivia replied, giving him a smile that made his heart skip. "And I wanted to do something useful. Besides, I am a good cook, even if I say so myself. You have done so much for us, the least I can do is make sure you have a decent meal." James was sitting at the table, drawing on a piece of paper with a stub of pencil, his tongue sticking out in concentration. He looked up when Tucker entered and grinned. "Mama says we can stay here forever if we want. Is that true?" Tucker glanced at Olivia, who had a faint blush on her cheeks. "It is true," he said. "You are both welcome to stay as long as you like. This is your home now if you want it to be." "I want it to be," James declared. "I like it here. It is big and there is no one scary looking for us." Tucker's chest tightened. He sat down at the table across from the boy. "James, I want to promise you something. I know you and your mother have been frightened for a long time, and I know you have had to run and hide. But that is over now. While you are here, no one is going to hurt you or your mother. I will make sure of that. Do you understand?" James looked at him with those serious eyes, then nodded slowly. "Because you are a cowboy and cowboys protect people." "That is right," Tucker said softly, "and because I care about you and your mother very much." They ate dinner together at the table, and it felt more natural than Tucker could have imagined. Olivia's cooking was indeed excellent, and James chattered about the horses he had seen and whether he might learn to ride one someday. After dinner, Olivia put James to bed while Tucker cleaned up the kitchen. When she emerged from the bedroom, closing the door softly behind her, she looked more relaxed than he had seen her since Keeler. "He fell asleep almost immediately," she said. "I think he finally feels safe enough to really rest." "And what about you?" Tucker asked. "Do you feel safe?" Olivia crossed the room to stand in front of him. "I do. For the first time in months, I feel like I can breathe. You did that, Tucker. You saved us." "We are not out of the woods yet," Tucker warned. "Hayes could still come, I know, but I am not facing it alone anymore. That makes all the difference." She reached up and touched his face, her palm warm against his cheek. "I meant what I said last night. I love you. And I want to build a life with you if you will have me." Tucker caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. "I will have you. I will have both of you. You and James. I know I am not his father, but I will do my best to be a good man for him to look up to. I will protect him and provide for him and teach him everything I know about this land and this life." "He already adores you," Olivia said, her eyes shining. "I can see it in the way he looks at you. You are everything his father was not, steady, honorable, kind. James needs that, and so do I." They stood together in the lamplight, holding each other, and Tucker felt a peace settle over him that he had not known since before the war. This woman, this child, they had become his purpose, his reason for everything. He would move heaven and earth to keep them safe and happy. True to his word, Tucker rode into Independence the next morning, leaving Olivia and James in Pete's capable care. The town was a day's ride east, nestled in the Owens Valley, and served as the county seat. Tucker went straight to the sheriff's office, where he found Sheriff Tom Blackwell, a grizzled lawman with a reputation for fairness and no tolerance for corruption. Tucker explained the situation as clearly as he could, and Sheriff Blackwell listened with increasing interest. "Carlton Hayes, you say, out of Philadelphia. I can send some telegrams, make inquiries. If this man is using fraudulent debts to extort a widow, that is a serious crime, but it might take some time to get answers from back east." "I understand," Tucker said. "But anything you can do would be helpful. In the meantime, I am keeping Mrs. Monroe and her son at my ranch where they will be safe." "You are a good man, Warren," Blackwell said. "Not many would ride 3 days to help someone in that kind of trouble. You let me know if Hayes shows up around here. I will be very interested in having a conversation with him." Tucker thanked him and returned to Copper Creek, feeling slightly more hopeful. If they could prove Hayes was acting illegally, it would solve a lot of problems. But even if they could not, Tucker was prepared to stand between Olivia and any threat that came for her. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm that felt almost normal. Olivia took over the running of the household, bringing a warmth and order to the ranch house that had been missing. She cooked and cleaned and mended clothes, but she also spent time learning about the ranch, asking Tucker questions about the cattle and horses and the land itself. James flourished in the open air, following Pete around like a puppy and begging to learn how to rope and ride. Pete, despite his gruff exterior, proved to have a soft spot for the boy and began teaching him basic horsemanship on one of the gentler mares. Tucker found himself falling more deeply in love with Olivia with each passing day. She was different from the girl he had known in Philadelphia, tempered by hardship and loss, but in many ways she was more herself than she had been back then. Here, without the constraints of society expectations, she laughed more freely and spoke her mind without hesitation. She was strong and capable and fiercely protective of James, and Tucker admired every aspect of her. They spent their evenings together after James went to bed, sitting on the porch and talking about everything and nothing. Tucker told her about his years building the ranch, about the loneliness and the satisfaction of creating something with his own hands. Olivia told him about her marriage to Robert, about the slow realization that she had made a mistake, and about the joy of becoming a mother and discovering that James made even the unhappiest circumstances bearable. "I do not regret James," she said one night, her head resting on Tucker's shoulder as they watched the stars. "Not for a single moment, but I regret the years I wasted trying to be someone I was not. I should have been here with you all along." "You are here now," Tucker replied, pressing a kiss to her hair. "That is what matters." 6 weeks after their arrival at Copper Creek, a rider came up the valley road carrying a telegram from Sheriff Blackwell. Tucker read it twice, then showed it to Olivia. "Carlton Hayes has no legal claim on your debts. Investigation shows he forged documents and bribed officials in Philadelphia. Warrants issued for his arrest. Federal marshals en route to apprehend him. You and Mrs. Monroe are in the clear." Olivia's hands shook as she read the telegram, and then she started laughing, great gasping laughs that turned into tears of relief. Tucker held her while she cried, feeling his own eyes burn with emotion. It was over. Hayes could not touch them now. "We are free," Olivia whispered against his chest. "James and I are really free." "You are," Tucker confirmed. "And now we can start thinking about the future without looking over our shoulders." That night, after James was asleep, Tucker took Olivia's hand and led her out onto the porch. The November air was cold, the stars brilliant overhead, and Tucker's heart was pounding so hard he thought it might burst from his chest. "Olivia Monroe," he said, turning to face her and taking both her hands in his. "I have loved you for 15 years. I loved you when we were young and foolish, and I let you go because I thought it was the right thing to do. I loved you through all the years we were apart, even when I tried to convince myself I had moved on. And I love you now, more than ever, because I have seen your courage and your strength and your beautiful heart. You and James have made this house a home. You have made my life complete in ways I did not even know were possible. Will you marry me? Will you let me be your husband and James's father? Will you build a life with me here at Copper Creek?" Tears streamed down Olivia's face, but she was smiling so brightly it put the stars to shame. "Yes," she said. "Yes, Tucker, I will marry you. I want nothing more than to be your wife and to raise James here with you. I want to give him brothers and sisters and show him what real love looks like. I want to spend every day of my life proving to you that I choose you, that I will always choose you." Tucker pulled her into his arms and kissed her deeply, pouring 15 years of longing and love into that kiss. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and laughing, he realized that Pete and several of the ranch hands had gathered near the barn and were cheering and whistling. "About time, boss," Pete called out. "We were wondering when you were going to make it official." Olivia laughed and hid her face against Tucker's shoulder, and Tucker grinned at his men. "Spread the word. There is going to be a wedding at Copper Creek Ranch come spring." They were married in April of 1883, on a warm day when the valley was green with new grass and wildflowers dotted the hillsides. Sheriff Blackwell came to perform the ceremony, and all the ranch hands attended, along with neighboring ranchers and their families who had come to know and respect Olivia in the months she had been living at Copper Creek. James stood beside Tucker during the ceremony, holding the rings with great seriousness, and when Tucker officially asked the boy if he would accept him as his father, James threw his arms around Tucker's waist and said yes so loudly that everyone laughed. Olivia was beautiful in a simple dress she had sewn herself, her copper hair crowned with wildflowers. When Tucker slipped the ring onto her finger and the sheriff pronounced them husband and wife, Tucker felt like his heart might actually stop from sheer happiness. He kissed his bride thoroughly, to the cheers and applause of everyone gathered, and when he pulled back and looked into Olivia's green eyes, he saw his entire future reflected there. They had a celebration that lasted into the evening, with food and music and dancing. James ran wild with the other children who had come, and for the first time since his father's death, he looked truly carefree. Olivia danced with Tucker under the stars, her body fitting perfectly against his, and she whispered, "Thank you for riding 3 days to bring me home." "Thank you for writing that letter," Tucker replied. "Thank you for trusting me enough to ask for help." "I would trust you with anything," Olivia said. "My life, my son's life, my heart, all of it is yours, Tucker Warren." Their first year of marriage was full of adjustments and joy. Olivia threw herself into ranch life with enthusiasm, learning to ride well enough to accompany Tucker when he checked on the herds. James grew like a weed, his thin frame filling out with good food and constant activity. Tucker legally adopted the boy, and James began using the name James Warren with fierce pride. In the spring of 1884, Olivia discovered she was expecting a baby. Tucker was beside himself with joy, and James was thrilled at the prospect of becoming a big brother. The pregnancy was difficult at times, but Olivia was strong and stubborn, refusing to let discomfort keep her from her daily routines. Tucker hovered anxiously, earning him gentle teasing from both his wife and Pete. Their son was born in December of 1884, a healthy baby boy with dark hair and his mother's green eyes. They named him Thomas Robert Warren, honoring both Tucker's father and Olivia's first husband, because, as Olivia said, "Robert gave me James, and I cannot regret that. James is part of our family, and so Thomas should carry his father's name." Tucker held his newborn son and felt a completeness he had never imagined possible. James, now 7 years old, was an attentive and loving big brother, always wanting to help with the baby. The ranch house rang with laughter and crying and all the chaotic noise of a real family. And Tucker loved every moment of it. Over the next several years, they added 2 more children to their family, a daughter named Emma in 1887 and another son named Daniel in 1889. The ranch prospered under Tucker's careful management and Olivia's steady hand, becoming known throughout the Owens Valley as one of the best-run operations in the region. James grew into a fine young man, tall and steady like Tucker, with his mother's quick mind and compassionate heart. He showed a natural talent for working with horses and became Tucker's right hand in training the ranch's remounts. As the years passed and Tucker watched his children grow, watched Olivia's hair gain threads of silver that only made her more beautiful to him, he often thought about that September morning in 1882 when he had opened her letter. His life had changed in that moment, redirected onto a path he had thought was closed to him forever. He had ridden 3 days to bring her home to safety, but in truth, she had brought him home too. She had given him purpose and love and a family that filled every corner of his heart. On their 20th wedding anniversary in 1903, Tucker and Olivia sat on the porch of their ranch house, watching the sun set over the Sierras. Their children were grown now, James married with children of his own, Thomas studying engineering in San Francisco, Emma teaching school in Independence, and Daniel still at home, preparing to take over more responsibility on the ranch. The house that had once felt too empty was now always full of visitors, grandchildren running through the rooms, laughter echoing off the walls. "You ever regret it?" Tucker asked, his arm around Olivia's shoulders. Leaving Philadelphia, coming out here to this rough country." Olivia laughed, the sound as beautiful to him as it had been 21 years ago. "Not for a single day. This is where I was always meant to be, Tucker. With you on this land raising our family. Everything that happened, all the fear and running and uncertainty, it was worth it to end up here." "I love you," Tucker said simply. "I have loved you my entire adult life, and I will love you until my last breath." "And I love you," Olivia replied, tilting her face up for his kiss. "My cowboy who rode 3 days to save me and spent the rest of his life proving that love can overcome anything." They sat together as darkness fell. Two people who had been separated by circumstance and pride, but brought back together by courage and faith. Around them, the ranch settled into its evening rhythms, horses nickering in the corrals, cattle lowing in the distance, the wind whispering through the valley. It was the sound of home, of family, of a love that had endured and grown stronger with time. Tucker Warren had built a good life for himself in the high desert country of Eastern California. But it was not until he rode 3 days to bring Olivia home to safety that his life became complete. She had asked for help and he had answered, and in doing so, they had both found their way to the happiness that had always been waiting for them. Their love story had started with letters written during a war, paused for 15 long years, and resumed with a desperate plea across miles of wilderness. It was a story written in dust and distance and devotion, and it ended exactly as it should have, with two people who had fought for each other, standing together under the endless western sky, surrounded by the family and the future they had built with their own hands. Years later, when their grandchildren would ask how Grandma and Grandpa fell in love, James would tell them the story of the letter and the 3-day ride. He would tell them about arriving at Copper Creek for the first time, exhausted and frightened, and how Tucker had promised to keep them safe and had kept that promise every day since. He would tell them about the wedding under the spring sky, about the way Tucker looked at Olivia like she was the most precious thing in the world, about the ranch growing and prospering and filling with children and grandchildren. And he would always end the story the same way. "Your grandfather rode 3 days to bring us home to safety, but the truth is, we brought him home too." That is what real love does. It brings you home, no matter how far you have wandered or how long you have been lost. It brings you home. Tucker and Olivia Warren lived to see their golden anniversary, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. All of them the legacy of a love that refused to die even when circumstances tried to kill it. They had built an empire of family and love out of nothing more than courage, faith, and the willingness to ride 3 days through the wilderness for the person who mattered most. And when Tucker finally passed peacefully in his sleep at the age of 84, with Olivia holding his hand, his last words were, "I would ride 3 days for you again, my love. I would ride forever." Olivia followed him 6 months later, her heart simply unable to beat without him. They were buried side by side on a hillside overlooking Copper Creek Ranch, under the endless sky they had both loved. Their children erected a simple stone marker that read, "Tucker and Olivia Warren. He rode to save her. She rode home with him." Together, they built a legacy of love that will never end. And on quiet evenings when the wind whispers through the valley, the descendants of Tucker and Olivia Warren still tell the story of the cowboy who found her letter asking for help and rode 3 days to bring her home to safety, and how that single act of courage and love changed everything for generations to come. The ranch still stands, still prospers, still echoes with the laughter of children who carry the blood of two people who refuse to let fear or distance or time keep them apart. It is a testament to the power of love, the strength of commitment, and the truth that sometimes the greatest journeys are the ones we take to bring the people we love home where they belong.